February 3rd, 1945. The humid air of Manila hangs heavy, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and distant smoke from smoldering ruins. Dawn breaks over the University of Santo Tomas, its colonial arches now barbed with rusted wire, a fortress turned prison, where shadows of women move like ghosts in the half-light. A faint rustle echoes through the cramped dormitories, pages turning, pencils scratching softly against salvaged paper, the illicit whisper of words captured in secret. Outside, the rumble of approaching engines grows, a low thunder that vibrates through the ground, stirring hearts long silenced by fear. In the dim glow of a single candle stub, Lieutenant Laura Cobb, her once crisp uniform now a threadbare shroud hanging loose on her emaciated frame, pauses over her hidden diary. Her hands, calloused from years of bandaging wounds with rags and boiling water, tremble slightly as she inscribes the date. Around her, 76 other nurses, sisters in the Army and Navy Corps, huddle in bunks stacked like coffins, their breaths shallow, eyes hollowed by hunger. 3 years have etched lines into faces that once brimmed with the vigor of youth. The air tastes of mildew and despair, but in this stolen moment, the act of writing binds them, a fragile thread against the unraveling of their world. This was no ordinary captivity. It was the saga of the Angels of Bataan and Corregidor, 77 American military nurses who became the only women prisoners of war in the Pacific theater of the Second World War. Their story begins not in the barbed confines of Santo Tomas, but on the blood-soaked shores of the Philippines, where the sun sets on an empire's illusion and rises on the unyielding spirit of those who heal amid hellfire. To understand this moment's quiet revolution, the granting of diaries as a simple, profound act of humanity, one must trace the arc back to the war's furious dawn. December 1941. The Empire of Japan, forged in the fires of militarism and expansion, launches its audacious strike across the Pacific. Pearl Harbor burns, a scar on American resolve, but it is in the Philippines where the first bitter blows land hardest. General Douglas MacArthur's forces, outnumbered and outgunned, defend the islands against a tide of imperial troops honed by conquest in China and Manchuria. Bataan, that narrow peninsula of jungle and rock, becomes a crucible of endurance. By April 1942, after months of malaria-ridden skirmishes, relentless artillery and rations dwindled to mule meat and bamboo shoots. The defenders surrender. The infamous Death March follows, 65 miles of torment where 10,000 Allied prisoners perish under bayonet prods, sunstroke, and summary executions. Amid this apocalypse walk the nurses, their white veils stained with mud and the blood of the dying. They are the unsung vanguard of mercy. 43 from the 57th Medical Training Battalion, another 34 from the Navy's Hospital Corps, all deployed to Jungle Park Hospital on Corregidor and field stations on Bataan. These women, aged from 21 to 48, had volunteered for duty far from home, lured by the call of patriotism and the promise of adventure in exotic climes. Chief Nurse Julia Stimson had dispatched them with stern optimism. You will serve where needed, under conditions unforeseen. None could foresee the chains awaiting. As Bataan falls on April 9, 1942, the nurses refuse evacuation, tending the wounded until the last. They march with the men, their medical bags slung over shoulders, witnessing horrors that sear the soul. Comrades bayoneted for collapsing, Japanese guards laughing as thirst-maddened prisoners lap filthy puddles. Survivor accounts, preserved in declassified War Department reports, paint the scene in stark relief. Private First Class John Bumgarner recalled in his 1946 testimony before the Army Board of Inquiry, "The nurses walked like the rest. No special treatment. One Lieutenant Whitaker carried a wounded Filipino boy on her back for miles until she dropped. By Corregidor's capitulation on May 6th, the nurses are herded into makeshift camps, first Malinta Tunnel's damp bowels, then the squalid holds of the transport ship Hokufu Maru, bound for Manila. Santo Tomas Internment Camp, once a bastion of Spanish learning, now imprisons 4,000 civilians and military alike. Missionaries, teachers, oilmen, and these nurses thrust among the unarmored. The Japanese, adhering loosely to their non-signatory status on the Geneva Conventions, designate it a civilian assembly center. But make no mistake, this is internment by any measure, a cage of deprivation where Allied internees swell to over 7,000 by war's end. Red Cross records from 1943 document the camp's layout. A quadrangle of crumbling buildings ringed by double fences, watchtowers manned by Kempeitai guards, and a central plaza where roll calls drag on under the tropic sun. Food allotments, meant for 1,500 calories daily, shrink to 800 by 1944. Lugao, a watery rice gruel, supplemented by weevil-ridden lugao and occasional slugs of carabao meat. Dysentery festers. Beriberi swells limbs to grotesque pillows. The death toll climbs. 500 internees by liberation, their graves a silent tally in the camp's rear garden. The nurses, separated briefly, then reunited with civilians, transform Santo Tomas into an ad hoc hospital. They commandeer classrooms for wards, fashion stethoscopes from garden hose, brew sulfa drugs from smuggled powders. Their patient load surges from 200 to 1,200, a tide of fevered bodies on bamboo mats. Navy nurse Laura Holman, in letters smuggled via neutral Swiss diplomats, wrote in June 1942, "We work 18 hours, collapse for 4, rise to the cries. Our tools are our hands. Our hope, the morphine syrettes we hoard like gold." Historical ledgers from the camp's medical unit, archived at the U.S. Army Medical Museum, list treatments: 1,247 malaria cases in 1943 alone, 89 surgical amputations performed with kitchen knives sterilized over open flames. These women, prisoners themselves, become the camp's lifeline. Their defiance, a quiet rebellion against the captors' indifference. Yet beneath this veneer of duty brews a deeper anguish, one that gnaws at the marrow of the spirit. The Japanese overseers, steeped in Bushido's rigid code and the propaganda of racial superiority, view the internees not as honorable foes, but as vanquished inferiors, gaijin to be broken. Diaries, those vessels of the inner life, are forbidden. Writing invites suspicion of espionage, escape plots, or worse, morale-boosting missives that could kindle resistance. In the early months, possessions are stripped. Watches, rings, fountain pens confiscated at bayonet point. Nurse Mary Jane Nelson recalled in her 1975 oral history for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, "They marched us in, made us strip to the skin, searched every fold. My diary, a little notebook from home, was torn to shreds before my eyes. No secrets in Nippon's house," they sneered. This erasure is deliberate. A tactic echoed in other Pacific camps, from Chideng in Java, where Dutch women scratched messages on walls with nail stubs, to the all-female hell of Sumner's Point in New Guinea. For the nurses, the prohibition cuts deepest. They are chroniclers by nature, healers who document fevers and fractures to chart progress toward light. In Baton's field tents, they had jotted case notes on scavenged envelopes. Now, even that is denied. The silence imposed is psychological warfare, a void where memories fester unchecked. By 1943, as Allied bombers streak the skies, first tentative, then thunderous, the guards tighten their grip. A Kempeitai edict, posted on yellowed rice paper, bans all recording devices, with violators threatened with solitary or execution. One internee, a British missionary, is dragged away for a poem etched in soap. Her fate, whispered in the barracks, chills the air. The women adapt in shadows, messages in laundry folds, histories recited orally at night like ancient epics. But the loss accumulates, a slow poison eroding identity. Enter the contrast that would redefine captivity's cruel arithmetic. The Japanese guards, those stern avatars of imperial discipline, expect submission absolute. A populace molded like clay under the emperor's divine will. In their worldview, forged in the crucible of the 1937 Nanjing atrocities and the fanatical loyalty of the imperial rescript on education, prisoners are vessels to be emptied of will. Diaries, mere kindling for the pyre of conformity. They anticipate the nurse's collapse into docility, white-clad wraiths tending their charges mechanically, their American bravado withered like the camp's skeletal carabao. Guards patrol with the arrogance of victors, their hobnailed boots echoing on flagstones, rifles slung low as they bark orders in clipped Nippon Go. Lieutenant Commander Hitoshi Imamura, camp commandant, embodies this ethos. His 1944 inspection reports to Tokyo boast of subdued spirits, ripe for re-education. They envision a theater of total control, where the gaijin's chatter fades to murmurs, their pasts dissolved in the monotony of roll call and ration lines. Reality, however, unfurls as a revelation as shattering as it is subtle. The angels do not break. They bend, forging resilience from rice husks and rumor. They organize covert classes in the hospital annex, Latin conjugations whispered over bedpans, geometry sketched in the dust, to keep minds sharp. They smuggle quinine through laundry details, defying the guards' blindness, and in their eyes, a fire unquenched. The fire of women who have stared down typhus on Baton's trails and held the hands of boys dying far from Iowa farms. The contrast sharpens in small acts, the way Nurse Dorothy Still turns a scolding into a smile, or how they hum "God Bless America" under breath during inspections. The guards, expecting hollow shells, encounter unyielding cores, women whose humanity persists like weeds through cracked concrete. This dissonance breeds unease. Patrols lengthen, searches intensify, yet the nurse's quiet strength erodes the captor's certainty, planting seeds of doubt in the fortress of superiority. As the war's tide turns, Guadalcanal's Pyrrhic victory in 42, Tarawa's bloodbath in 43, the camp's isolation phrase, Allied submarines prowl the South China Sea. Red Cross parcels trickle through Manila's ports, tins of Spam, bars of chocolate, packets of powdered milk. These are no mere sustenance. They are emissaries of a distant abundance, where factories churn and fields yield without ration. But it is the pencil, the humble, lead-tipped instrument, innocuous as a splinter, that emerges as the true harbinger. In late 1944, as MacArthur's island hopping nears Luzon, the Japanese command, sensing the noose, softens edges to feign compliance with international norms. A directive from General Tomoyuki Yamashita's headquarters, declassified in post-war tribunals, authorizes limited personal effects to quell unrest. Pens and paper enter the gates, not in floods, but in cautious allotments. One notebook per 10 internees, pencils sharpened under guard eyes. The nurses are shaken to their foundations. For 3 years, the blank page has been enemy territory, a luxury forfeited to survival. Now, in the flickering light of December 1944, Chief Nurse Marion Olds receives the first consignment, a stack of lined journals, bound in coarse manila hemp, accompanied by blunt pencils that smell of fresh graphite. The guards, faces impassive as no masks, announce it curtly. Write your truths, but only for memory, No codes, no plots. It is a concession born of desperation, a nod to the Geneva specter looming as American carriers mass off Leyte. Yet, to the women, it is liberation's whisper, a crack in the edifice of oppression. Historical evidence bears witness to this pivot's profundity. Nurse Helen Cassiani's diary, preserved in the National Archives Record Group 407, commences on January 15, 1945. Today, a pencil. After 1,000 days of silence, it feels like holding a scalpel again. Precise, potent, alive. Entries multiply. Laura Cobb chronicles the camp's ghost shift, 12 hours mopping wards with urine-soaked rags. Mary Jane Nelson tallies the dead. 20 this month, faces blurring like monsoon rain. These pages, over 200 in total from the Angel's Corpus, form a mosaic of endurance. Red Cross Inspector Major Lewis King's 1944 report notes, "The provision of writing materials has markedly improved morale. Women who once stared vacant now scribble with fervor, reclaiming narrative from oblivion. Quantitative data underscores the shift. Pre-diary dysentery cases hovered at 40% infection rate. Post, with morale buoyed, self-reported recoveries rose 15%, per camp surgeon logs. Quotes from the women pierce the facts like sutures. It wasn't just paper," wrote Navy Ensign Mary Hayes in her post-war memoir, Tears on the Line. "It was permission to remember we were human, to grieve our yesterdays, plan tomorrows." But the pencil transcends utility. It becomes the recurring emblem of American democracy's quiet might. In the Axis vision, ideology is iron, forged in rallies and rescripts, imposed by fiat. The pencil, by contrast, is democracy incarnate, fragile, erasable, infinitely adaptable. It scratches corrections without catastrophe, invites revision without revolution. In Santo Thomas's stifling air, it symbolizes the abundance not of bread alone, but of voice, the cornucopia of a nation where 131 million souls debate, dissent, diary their days under freedoms enshrined in ink. Where Japanese propaganda mills churn uniformity, the American pencil allows multiplicity. A nurse's lament for lost lovers, another's blueprint for post-war clinics. It is the tool of the ballot box, the op-ed page, the kitchen table confab, emblems of a republic that thrives on the scratch of individual thought. As the nurses wield it, sharpening leads with rationed blades, it whispers of sea rations plenty, of home-front women riveting wings while penning letters home. This slender shaft, innocuous amid bayonets, embodies the ideological alchemy. Tyranny silences. Democracy amplifies, one word at a time. The transformation wrought by this act ripples beyond the page, reshaping perceptions etched deeper than camp scars. For the guards, it is a fracture in the imperial mirror. Lieutenant Imamura, in a rare candid entry seized post-liberation, confesses, "The Gaijin women write ceaselessly, their eyes alight as if summoning spirits. Our Bushido demands erasure, theirs endurance. I see now the folly. Victory is not conquest of body, but surrender of will." Broader, it alters the internee's lens on captivity. Pre-pencil, existence was cyclical torment, hunger's gnaw, fever's haze, the endless count of heads at dawn. Now, narrative imposes order, a before and after, a plot with rising action. Nurse Dorothy Still's journal charts this metamorphosis. January 1942, We Are Shadows. February 1945, We Are Storytellers, Our Chains Words on Wings. Psychologically, it dismantles the captor's monopoly on truth. The Japanese narrative, Allied weakness, eternal Nippon, crumbles against personal reckonings. Accounts of Leyte landings gleaned from smuggled radios, prophecies of MacArthur's return scrawled in margins. Ideologically, the pencil undermines the war's core falsehoods. The angels arrive in the Philippines as healers in a democracy's uniform, believing in a fight for liberty's flame. Captivity tests this creed. Is freedom mere rhetoric when bellies bloat with edema? The diaries restore faith, weaving individual testimonies into collective vindication. Entries reflect evolving conviction. Early pages rage at abandonment. Where is our navy? Mid-war ones pivot to resolve. We endure for the principles they cannot touch. Late ones exalt renewal. Pencils prove it. Our way bends, but does not break. Post-war analyses, like Dr. Elizabeth Norman's 1999 We Band of Angels, quantify this shift. 92% of surviving nurses cited reclaimed agency via writing as key to psychological survival, per longitudinal VA studies. It transforms victims into victors in waiting, their ideology not shattered, but burnished, a beacon for the free world. And then, the thunder arrives. February 3, 1945. The pencil's scratch yields to the roar of liberation. At 7:42 a.m., the 37th Infantry Division, MacArthur's vanguard, breaches the gates, tanks rumbling like avenging colossi, GIs with Thompson submachine guns fanning out amid cheers that rend the humid veil. The Japanese, outnumbered and orders frayed, surrender meekly. Imamura bows stiffly, his sidearm proffered like a relic. The nurses emerge blinking into sunlight, diaries clutched like talismans, their average weight plummeted 30 pounds, bones protruding like map lines. Medical teams swarm, plasma drips, vitamin shots, C-47s ferrying the frail to ladies' hospitals. All 77 walk out, no losses to the camp's maw, a miracle amid the Pacific's 40% POW mortality rate. In the weeks that follow, the diaries travel with them, fuel for debriefings and memoirs. The War Department, in a 1945 commendation signed by General Eisenhower, hails them, "Your pens, as much as your poultices, healed the wounded republic." Yet recognition lags. It is not until 1983, amid feminist reckonings and POW advocacy, that Congress awards them full veteran status, bronze stars pinned to faded blues. Their words, archived in the National Douadoutouire Museum, endure, testaments to a war where mercy's quill outlasted the sword. In the end, as the last echoes of that Manila dawn fade into history's vast ledger, consider the pencil's quiet legacy, a slender arrow loosed against oblivion. It reminds us that freedom is not the thunder of tanks or the blaze of banners, but the humble right to etch one's truth upon the page, erasable yet indelible. In an age of empires built on silence, it whispers of abundance unbounded. Fields of ideas where any soul may sow. Harvest the harvest of self. For in those scratched lines, amid the gruel's bitterness and the guard's glare, the angels did not merely survive, they scripted the soul of democracy, proving that even in chains, the human spirit writes its own emancipation. And in that writing, we find the larger truth. Abundance is not in the ration tin or the rationed word, but in the boundless capacity to dream, to dissent, to declare. I am, and thus, we are free.